Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Prevention Perk. I probably say this each time, but it's certainly genuine today. I am very excited about the conversation that we're going to have. We're going to talk about drug endangered children, and Chuck and I were chatting about this before we came on. And, about a decade or so ago, I think a lot of people in the audience will recall that methamphetamine manufacturing was a big problem in our communities. We were having explosions, kids were being injured. There was a lot of concern about what can be done about meth labs. And out of that came this initiative, Drug Endangered Children. There's actually a national alliance. Some of you may not know that, National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children that grew up during that time period. And the community here in Springfield and Greene County was addressing drug endangered children from a local perspective. And I joined the partnership in 2009, and our efforts along those lines just continued to evolve. We became trained in their model for drug endangered children. I went out to their headquarters in Denver, Colorado, and participated in a training and brought that back to Springfield, Greene County in the Southwest Missouri region. And I kind of began a partnership with our guest today because Chuck was kind of working in the other end of that spectrum from the state of Missouri's perspective. And we did a number of presentations, and I'm hoping that it did a lot of good in the communities that we serve, just talking about what is a drug endangered child, talking also dovetailing that with, the phenomenon or the epidemic of methamphetamine use and the meth production. And as we all know, those things began to change, the production aspect of it. Pseudoephedrine laws came into place. We started to see that domestic production of methamphetamine was on the decline. And it just seemed like that it coincided with kind of a slowdown in the reception for the drug endangered children model, if you will, because I think it was so closely aligned with methamphetamine production. And we tried, at least locally here, to kind of shift that focus a little bit and did a number of things. But it just never seemed to have the same community reception, if you will, which is often the times happens with prevention initiatives. But suffice it to say, I think we know as well that methamphetamine continues to be a huge issue, but that doesn't have to be the central focus of drug endangered children. So that's really why this conversation is happening today. Ironically, I've had two different people approach me in the last month about DEC and where it was at and wanting to know more about it. And so I thought, well, that'd be a great topic for a prevention perk. And I reached out to Chuck, and he's kind of got his pulse on where the National Alliance is with drug endangered children, just where the concept of DEC is right now. There's been a lot of things added to that model, and I thought it would be a great conversation for us to get caught up on. And then if communities are interested, we'll try to help you move forward on those resources and so forth. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest today. I think a lot of you know him. Chuck Doherty is the director of ACT Missouri and what is referred to as the Prevention Technology Transfer Center. And he is in Jefferson City, Missouri. And like I said, I've known Chuck now for a better part of a decade. And we've covered a lot of ground on this subject, but after having a conversation with him, I'm eager to learn even more about what's happening with DEC. So Chuck, introduce yourself and if you will, get us caught up on this whole model or concept of DEC.
I can do that. Thanks for inviting me. I always want to talk about drug endangered children. I always want to talk about moving the movement forward. Like Steve said, it's still early in the morning for me, I'm sorry. Like Steve said, I've been involved with the drug endangered children movement since 2001 when I was living in Texas. And that was at the height of the methamphetamine stuff in Texas, the labs. Drug endangered children movement started out as a law enforcement initiative to help move youth out of methamphetamine labs across the nation. And it worked. Trained a lot of there was a lot of protocol training on what the kids needed, specifically for methamphetamine addiction, methamphetamine exposure, how to work with law enforcement to meet their needs, how to work with family services to help meet the specific needs of a drug endangered child. Every state, every coalition was taxed with coming up with protocols to teach that, to implement, to help in their communities. In Texas, I was on the Texas Alliance for Drug Endangered Children, and I was chairperson of the Dallas County DEC. Luckily, when I moved to Missouri had just gotten involved around 2009-ish. Just got involved around DEC and had a conference, and ACT Missouri attended it and became involved then. At that point, things were changing a bit from methamphetamine. When the domestic production stopped on methamphetamine, or slowed down, not stopped because it's still out there, slowed down, we weren't sure what direction drug endangered children were going. And we talked about it and chatted across the nation and decided that the motto of the National Alliance, children plus drugs equal risk, accounted for any drug. And that's the push we've gone since then. It is not specifically methamphetamine, but any chemical, any substance, any drug that endangers a child's life because their caregivers are using, because they're exposed at home, exposed at daycare, wherever they're at. It doesn't have to be methamphetamine to be just as dangerous. It can be some of the socially accepted drugs, chemicals that can put kids at risk. So it's been a real major change. I think nationally too, when we saw law enforcement start taking care of the domestic methamphetamine problem across the nation, we saw lots of states kind of stopping and saying, what do we do now? Where do we go? How do we get? And they kind of lost interest and things. So choosing to work with any child affected by substances kind of got folks going again. So that's just a real brief history. Steve talked about the Prevention Technology Transfer Center. ACT Missouri applied for that grant through SAMHSA, and part of the application process was we had to serve a specialty audience we were going to serve, not just the regular. We had to do prevention across the region. We had to provide the best prevention service we could. We had to also pick a special population. And ACT Missouri, because of our interest in drug endangered children, because of our experience with the state and the national, that was our specialty population we wrote into our Prevention Technology Transfer Center grant. And it was awarded. So we've implemented some of the stuff from national, working in close partnership with the National DEC. In fact, I'm on the board of directors for the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children, so I work with them closely. I'm a certified trainer for them, do a lot of stuff nationally to bring into Mid-America and the Mid-America PTTC. For our Mid-America PTTC, we're serving a 4-county area, not 4-county, 4-state area, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. It's the HHS Region 7. And so we're bringing drug endangered children information to all 4 states and trying to renew interest across the board on 4 states. And it seems to be working. That's history and where we're at to now. Do you have any specifics, Steve?
Yeah, well, and I know that you've talked about this, and I think that it might give the audience some resource. So there is the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children has a website that's available. But I think what's interesting is that when we had the Greene County DEC, we kind of pioneered the use of current technology, and we developed a phone app, or you could use it on your iPad as well. But we developed an app that had the resources available and can be used as a training and or teaching tool in the communities. And it's my understanding now that in addition to the resources that National DEC offers, they have an app. And if you can talk a little bit about that and maybe how people could tap into that, I think that maybe that's a resource they could look at beyond today's discussion.
Oh, certainly. Greene County, and y'all, was it a CPO or Greene County, developed this amazing app for drug endangered children that the National used for the longest time, and then decided to build their own based on a lot of what the Greene County app was. If you go to the Google store or what's iPhone store, I don't have an iPhone.
App Store.
App Store, look under Check Deck. CheckDEC, and it is a pretty comprehensive application. It's going to have 5 tiers. They released it with 3. It's going to have the ability to find treatment across the United States. If you get someone that needs to have treatment, it's going to have a checklist of the protocols, have stories. They're talking about, in one of the later versions, having a place for practitioners to be able to chat. So folks in North Carolina could chat with Missouri about what's going on or what we're seeing, share protocols, share stories, share anecdotes. So it's really comprehensive. Anyone can use it and be able to help provide services to this population of youth that people don't really understand the amount of trauma and what they've gone through, and just help provide that education.
So Chuck, we've already talked about this, and I'm thinking that maybe some of the audience may be a little bit unsure about. You've mentioned the protocol a couple of times. Let's flesh that out a little bit. At the core, what DEC has always kind of been about is about that intervention and helping the children that are in drug endangered environments, but its outcome is really trying to move along that continuum of family unification. So the whole family receiving supports, not just mom or dad going to jail, or mom and dad losing custody or something. It's how do you reunify or keep the family unification, and how do you provide kind of that trauma informed kind of care for the child and the family as they kind of rebuild from a drug exposed environment. So how do the protocols play a part of that, if you can talk about that?
Absolutely. The protocols have changed. In the beginning, when it was law enforcement driven, protocols were how to move a child from the meth lab to the hospital to foster care and beyond. We understand now that that's not always the best route for youth. Kids can stay home and get services. Kids can stay home and get treatment. Protocols now are looking at trauma assessments. Of course, we want kids that are exposed to have the physical, the medical, just the regular assessments and physicals. But now it's also to look at other services available for the family. For maybe the spouse that's home and not using, but there's still stuff going on with the kids that are endangered and exposed by another caregiver or another visitor that's exposing to you. So it's changed a bunch where we're actually meeting the kids where the services need to be, not so much this is the outline protocol of where we're moving to. We know that many youth that experience living in a drug endangered children home have trauma like crazy, like huge high ACE scores, lots of trauma. And so how are we going to address that? How do we find someone to meet those needs, Who do you talk to? How do you implement that kind of a treatment program, treatment plan for those youth in the community? This is still community-based, still coalition-based, and we always believe, and I promote this every chance I get, local people solve local problems. And that's why we need the coalitions together and start working on these youth, with these children. So protocols, I can't really say that it's this, and this, because it's based on what needs you have in your community and what service you offer in your community.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to kind of illustrate a little bit of maybe how that worked out for Greene County, because there was a protocol that the National Alliance used as kind of a blueprint, if you will. And the Missouri Alliance had a protocol, and then Greene County began to develop one. And of course, it was unique for Springfield and our service area, because we had Children's Division, we had probation and parole, we had foster parents involved, juvenile was involved, we had the prosecuting attorney's office, law enforcement, and we all kind of sat down and we would think about, what is in the best interest of the family when this crisis occurs. And so that's kind of what the protocol was designed, was to bring that systems of care, if you will, into play when the crisis occurred. And from that's where the application evolved from. We thought, well, we can have the protocol in the app, which is available to any service provider when they're in the field. And it would give them kind of that step-by-step, the phone calls, who to contact, things to look for, that sort of stuff was built into it. But then it went one step further in it, and it provided some training for the provider themselves, or a case manager, about addiction, about trauma, about resources. And then there was also a track within the app that provided some learning tools for the family about the impact of addiction on their children, and what were some of the services that might be available, what were some of the support groups that might be in the community that might be beneficial. It was really about creating a common dialogue between the service provider and the family that they were trying to bring service to, so that they spoke a language that they both understood. And so that's kind of, the protocol was a paper document. It helped everybody coordinate on the scene. And then the app that was developed within the phone or for your device was what you do beyond the protocol's implementation. And it was all in housed under one roof, so to speak. So I would assume that in any community, because I know we have people from SEMO here today, PFS, we have people from West Plains, Douglas County here in Springfield. So you're all serving different communities. Louise is from Webster County. So you're going to have different thoughts on this and different people at the table. So how do you bring it all together is really, if this is of interest going forward, it takes that. I think Chuck is right. The local people making the local decisions about how do you take the family and certainly the child's care into consideration from the very beginning. I think way back before all this, it was usually somebody went to jail and the kid was placed with someone close to in the family or in foster care or whatever it was, without really thinking, gosh, how has the family really been impacted, and what are the needs of the child? And I think that this has kind of helped foster that, if I'm correct, Chuck.
Absolutely. It kind of gets everyone involved in the 12 sectors and really looks at the needs of the specific population. And we know a lot more about the kids now than we did in the beginning. When I was in Texas, one of the things that I was able to do was I went to methamphetamine lab arrests, and as law officers are bringing out small children, like 18 months old, they're just handing them off to people to take care of it. I got one. And it was amazing that the child didn't cry. It came to me. It wanted to be with me, which at the time stroked my ego. But now I know that there was the trauma involved. An 18-month-old child should not just readily go to a stranger. That said something about how they've been socialized or not, what's going on with their amount of trauma. We identify that stuff now and can deal with it. So we made a lot of changes in what's happened. And I think all that's reflected in the new, I say new, in the new approach to the National DEC is promoting to our local states and communities. One of the things that ACT Missouri and the Mid-America PTTC offers as part of our specific training is we do DEC academies across our 4-state area. Did one in Kansas. It's a six session, hour-and-a-half session over a period of time that offers some coaching, some technical assistance from both the PTTC and National DEC on how to start a DEC program. With core DEC training from National DEC, we have folks that talk about capacity building, folks that talk about collaboration, folks that talk about specific needs for DEC, just anything that would work. That, but it's a 6-session. Offered it in Kansas, the other state in our region. And by the time that they graduated, completed the academy, there were 8 more coalitions in Kansas that were up and running and ready to go, ready to meet the needs across the state.
I think people go ahead.
Currently, we're doing one in Iowa that I think will have about the same process. Iowa has a strong DEC program, but at the same time, everyone else was, there's kind of wane too. And so we're trying to rebuild some of that up. I'm sorry, Steve.
No, that's fine. I think part of what will help people understand is, DEC had their own protocol and their own training from as early as I can remember, 2009 or 10, when I first got involved with them. But what has happened, and it sounds like Chuck's alluded to that, and our audience might resonate with this, is that they really have kind of embraced the 12 sector concept and the strategic prevention framework and brought in the prevention tools that we in this audience really understand and kind of merge those two worlds, which was really something that brought it more closely to a coalition initiative, not just a few agencies at the table. Not that wasn't a coalition, but really bringing the entire community underneath the umbrella of DEC is kind of where they're at now, as I understand it.
Yes, and National DEC has come up with some new ways to encourage coalitions and states to affiliate with them. That allows their use of the national logo. The perks you get for being an affiliate, and that's all changed to where I think it's going to encourage more folks to do it.
Right.
Drug Endangered Children has had new leadership, the National Drug Endangered Children Alliance, and it's been real good for them. They've been able to do a lot of cool stuff and make some real changes in the way they provide services that have people trying to sit up and take notice and are wanting to be involved more and wanting to join more.
Well, we had one question in the chat, just about to give the name of the app again, and Chuck, you answered that. If people have a question that they would like to ask, you can either put it in the chat box there, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and just you can raise your hand, or just ask a question if you have one as it's come up during this discussion. We have about 6 minutes left in our conversation about drug endangered children. So I want to make sure we answer any specific questions that the audience might have. So I'll take a pause here. Is there anyone that does specifically want to ask about DEC and where it's at, and maybe how we can connect you closer to it?
Use your voice and come off. I'd like to talk to anyone.
Well, I'll just kind of connect the dots. Was that someone?
That's my phone.
Okay, so I might connect the dots just as a thought, because I can see Louise on the screen here, and I know that she works up at the Webster County Health Unit, and their MCH grant is looking at the 40 developmental assets, and that kind of brings this whole thing together. I mean, if you're familiar with the Search Institute's work on the developmental assets, that's really about meeting the needs of the child. But if you really drill down and you kind of flesh that out to a broader perspective, it's really about meeting the needs of the family. It's a better communication model. It's about building internal and external strengths in a person's life, whether that's a child. My good friend Dr. Kim Fielding used to always say that when we talk about the child, we're really talking about cradle to the grave, because none of us really ever, master this thing. We're always learning. And so that's what it really drives at. And I think that the assets really fit within kind of a DEC initiative, if you will, because you're looking at tools that you can bring to your community and to those families that have been impacted by trauma. And when you live in a drug endangered environment, you've been impacted by trauma. So yeah, those are some things that you can think about. What are we already doing, or what could we do in our community that might move us towards a DEC initiative?
If you have questions or want to get involved with your communities, get a hold of Steve and he can direct you toward Acton, Missouri. We can hook you up with our Mid-America PTTC. Call me. One of the things that the COVID had done with Acton, Missouri is we're not in office anymore. We're all working remotely. And if you think you want to give me a call, call my cell phone, area code 817-832.
Chuck, if you wouldn't mind, would you just put all that information in the chat, and they could copy
8559. I'll do that right now.
Yeah. And I was telling Chuck before we logged on, I was really pleased at our roster of guests this morning, because there are some people from all across the state of Missouri. And I know that this predates a lot of people that are probably in the audience, but we did have a very finely tuned DEC initiative in Missouri probably about six years ago. But like I said, things do change with prevention, and the focus of our drug initiatives kind of took a different direction. But we all know that methamphetamine, and that's not the primary focus here, is still an issue. And drug endangered children will probably always continue to be something that we should be concerned about. So I'd be happy to answer any questions after today's conversation. And Chuck has shared his contact information there for ACT Missouri. If you'd like to connect with him about some of the broader placement of DEC in your community, then feel free to reach out. Chuck, any other parting thought?
Let me know if the interest in getting DEC Academy to Missouri. It's great prevention, great planning, great organization for a coalition or an alliance. No matter what, we need to get more folks educated. And I appreciate you all inviting me to come. And Steve, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is fun.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. These are always great conversations. It's good to see, like I said, people from across the state to be here today. Continue to reach out to Chuck or myself. We'd love to hear from you about this or any of the prevention perks we've done in the past. Again, this is recorded and it will be on our YouTube page, CP Ozarks. There's a link available. I can send that out and you can share it with other people in your communities as you go forward in pioneering perhaps a DEC initiative in the community where you reside. So thanks for being here today, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thank you.